if I look at two versions of myself, the 8-year-old version, the 80-year-old version, would they be proud or happy with what I'm currently doing? And I think that's an absolute travesty to be wasting one's potential or what somebody wants to do with their life.
Today we've got a very special guest. Welcome, Darryl.
I do worry, especially with AI and people building stuff, vibe coding, you completely skip all of the basics and the foundations. But like the most high-powered agent doing ls commands on your computer is probably not a good use case. Giving people access to AI and AI tooling, the job's not done. The plane takes off and goes in a specific direction, but unknowingly goes 1 degree off to the left or right. You'll end up in a completely different location, and I think life ends up being like that as well.
Hi everyone, welcome to Assembly Line episode 6. Today we've got a very special guest. Welcome, Darryl. Nick, nice to see you. Good to have you with us, even though online. Where are you at the moment, Nick?
I am in Greece at the moment.
Nice, exploring your roots.
I don't have the Acropolis in my background, unfortunately, but now with all of the talk on Odyssey, I thought I'd get a little bit closer, come and watch the movie in Greece.
Our guest today has spent the better part of a decade building cloud systems across South Africa and Africa for some of the biggest enterprises, banks across the continent, and I'm sure some global customers as well. Started off as in your humble beginnings, software engineer, working at one of the biggest banks here, FNB in South Africa. And then, really developing over 11 years your kind of career at Synthesis, building the cloud practice there and growing that team to, I believe, about 100 engineers.
Yep.
And then, moved a little bit into kind of business consulting, but then ultimately, and on paper, and especially when we met, kind of 5-6 years ago, I had you as one of my kind of people to look up to and role models, and still do today, by the way. And then I think you very interestingly decided that there's kind of more to what you're capable of, and have decided to go out on your own with in the consumer space. It's very bold, very, very big move. But very excited to have you here, Darryl. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Maybe you can start off just telling us where you come from, your background.
So I started out as a software engineer, like you said, and found a love for programming actually when I was about 13 years old. Got exposed to it at a very young age. Again, fortunate enough to have that as something. I think it's more accessible now, but back then it was quite novel actually. Could have been on a very different path, honestly, if not.
What would you have done?
In my kind of culture, it would probably be accountant, lawyer, doctor, along those types of lines. But engineering for me was just a very clear love and passion from a very early age, and then very fortunate to grow a career in that space.
So you said something interesting. Your background and culture. It is important that I want to dig into that, because similarly, I come from also like conservative Greek parents, and I believe conservative probably Indian parents as well.
Yeah,
we were also, it was like doctor, lawyer, accountant.
Yeah.
What was kind of the background before we get into the code and before we get into cloud?
It was honestly, it was the scripted lifestyle. I think a lot of my generation will be very used to it, which is get a good education, get a good job, work your way up, get married along the way, have kids and retire kind of thing. So it's very much around like being employed and in a space that is safe. So it was, like you say, conservative. You're trying to find something that's going to be safe, it's going to stand the test of time, as our parents knew it then. And as we know now, the world changes so fast. The younger generations, I think, are onto something with learning new skills, skill stacking, growing and trying different things, whether they're in their 20s or 30s. I'm only picking up on that journey now, in having turned 40 this year. But I think growing up in that scripted kind of environment really influenced the first 20 years of my working career, rightly or wrongly. I mean, it's worked out to some degree, but could it have been different? I sometimes think about that, yeah.
Could have been speaking about tax returns now instead.
Could have. I could have been asleep behind this mic. No, just kidding.
And maybe just share with us your interest and what interested you in code initially as a 13-year-old.
Yeah. So I got exposed. So 13, I was in grade 8, and we were picking subjects, and I remember it was, maybe friend is the wrong word, but he literally like he wrote up this little program and was like these flashing characters on the screen. That was pretty. I'm sure they were derogatory at the time, like, "Hey, Darryl, you're a X," kind of thing. And I was like, "That's amazing. How did you do that?" Like, "Well, screw you, but Rolls, how did you do that?" And I was hooked. I was like, because I'd never, growing up, I grew up with gaming and things like that, but I never thought about how you build the software behind it.
Mm.
And after seeing just that very simple example with, a very, very, very simple little line of code flashing in red text, I was hooked. I was like, how does that work? I want to understand that. I want to unpack that. And from 13, pretty much committed to it. And I remember it was the only thing I really cared about, all the way into varsity, and then getting into like building my career.
What were you coding in?
No one's going to remember this. Turbo Pascal back then. So a bit of assembler, Turbo Pascal, all of that kind of stuff. Eventually, when I got into university, it was Java at least. So a little bit more modernized, but I started in the thick of it.
And self-taught completely. I mean,
there was a lot of like studies over and above what we were being taught at high school, especially. We talk about computer studies, not really computer science back then in high school. So it was really like you were learning like the basics of computing as well as some programming. So it wasn't really deep, but I would spend a lot of time like trying to go deep. At the time, as a youngster, you're thinking about like, what's the most exciting use case? The most exciting use case is gaming. You're not thinking about like payment systems and banking and that kind of thing. So it became about like honing the skills, building pretty terrible games, honestly, but building things that you care about and that are fun.
What was the first app that was almost like your eureka moment that you were like, this is it. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Funnily enough, like one of my pet projects was a mobile app, a Java J2ME mobile app from back in the day. And it was a little game of literally a little fruit disc chasing you around while you were collecting stuff. So it was like a snake copy. And it was just like, the enjoyment of just solving that kind of problem and what is a fun domain. Like it was just something that the bug bites and you just keep going like deeper down the rabbit hole.
how old were you when you built that?
I was about 14, probably. Wow. Yeah.
And now we're getting into much, much bigger applications, as we'll get into in a bit.
And the use of AI has just like completely changed the game around making this accessible. Because back then when you're learning how to program, it's very much like you bring out the big 500-600 page manual and you're reading through like how to do it. Whereas nowadays you can bring something to life just in a few sentences describing it to AI. And very many platforms to actually take it and go to market. But yeah.
I remember when because I also, did IT and computer science in school, and we had to learn Java by reading a book, like a manual.
Yes.
It was like a Java for dummies.
Yes.
Type of thing. And I always thought it was a strange experience. You read a book to learn something digital. Yeah.
In matric, I remember, and now I'm just giving away my age, but the matric exam for computer science was a written program on paper. Like that's how you submitted your thing. It wasn't anywhere near what we do nowadays.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And then progressing from there. Okay, so you then started off, went to university. Where did you do that?
Actually went to like a single year college kind of setup with CTI in Westville, so in Durban, and ended up working there like for a little bit, like as a
At
junior.
uni?
Yeah, as a junior kind of lecturer, which was kind of funny. I mean, I was 19 at the time. And I remember one of my friends from matric actually he studied engineering, gave it up, came and joined CTI. So I ended up being his lecturer, which is kind of weird. Like went to school together in the same grade. But I think it was a good experience for me because it got me out of my shell as well. I'm quite introverted by nature. But, working with people day to day, like helping them to solve stuff, you develop a bit of a love for working in a bit more of a team environment, so to speak. But I think what I found in that kind of setting was I wanted to actually get out there and actually build stuff. I wanted to actually build software, like lecturing and maybe a little bit of like repetition was good to hone the craft a bit. But I really wanted to practice a lot more. Like you suggested, reading a manual to learn something digital that is very hands-on is a little bit tricky. So it became a case of let's pack up the bag and try out a career in software. And I thought at the time, what's the best place to do it? Probably Johannesburg. So literally just packed up the old computer suitcase, got in the car, like organized with a friend of mine. Can you put me up for a couple of months? And just made the trek, and then started looking for a job. In hindsight, probably not the best idea. Should have probably found a job before I moved.
Yeah.
But I just decided to move and
Man of
figured it out from
commitment.
there. Yeah, you've got to go all in. And I guess 20 years later, I kind of did the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you ended up first at F&B. How did you get that job? Or was F&B your first job?
F&B was a little bit later for me. I joined a few like small software, they had software development teams inside a bigger business. So it just became like software teams in a different, like, in different industries. Like as an example, one of them was the National Golf Network. So literally like the software behind like the golf handicap system as
No
an
ways.
example. Yeah. So, you know, you end up in these kind of teams just honing the craft. But it wasn't necessarily deliberate. And I think as a youngster, and I'll touch on this as well, like it wasn't really a deliberate path. It was more a case of like, where can I just get an opportunity to practice and hone my skills and become better at this, rather than going and saying, let me find the ideal place to build skills. Like nowadays, like mentioning F&B or any of our banks, like they are really great places to actually incubate and learn like tough skills. But back then it was really about, let's just learn and then look to earn and grow.
But it was very I mean, the software industry was much smaller back then.
Yeah.
And it was almost a hobbyist game. I mean, to a large extent, there was like big businesses pushing the boundaries.
Yeah.
It wasn't as massive. I mean, today I think there's like 30 million people worldwide that can code.
Yeah.
I can imagine it was a fraction of that,
Yeah.
some 20 years ago.
Yeah, and it made it hard to actually like grow in the space, because a lot of it is like you're learning as you go, which is great. But in terms of the actual, like you say, the community around you was a lot smaller. Mostly you're learning from the people next to you or the senior who works in the team who sometimes has time for you, kind of thing. F&B, as an example, was a greater example of where that became, you have broader access to people. You know, big organization, a lot of different teams doing a lot of cool stuff. So that was nice. So I much preferred that in the sense of being exposed to different projects and different people and different teams. And I think that's why it actually the allure of like technology consulting became interesting, because it wasn't just in one space or one domain or working in one team. It became like you're getting exposure to a lot.
But a variety of domains, a variety of types of problem statements.
Yeah.
At different types of enterprises.
Yeah, exactly.
But sticking to F&B for a while, because I think that's very important. And for people that are listening that are not from South Africa and Africa, First Rand Group is one of the largest banks in Africa, and for many years were digital innovation. They won all the digital innovation awards that you can imagine.
Yeah.
Maybe speak to us about a little bit of your contribution to that and what you were kind of working on at F&B at those times.
Yeah. So back then, it was around the online platform, the F&B banking online platform. So I joined that team, and they were going through, I think internally it was called the Mammoth program.
They're still running Mammoth.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
So still going. So literally like that whole conversion, trying to really improve their digital channels. So I was part of like a very big team of people actually doing that. So you can imagine like just one feature alone. And I think sometimes consumers maybe neglect this or don't really think about it. Maybe they really shouldn't care, but it's ultimately you've got these entire teams of people running projects for months, sometimes years, trying to bring specific features to light. And it also gave me like a good taste of the regulatory side, because it's not just a case of like, hey, here's a great idea and let's get it to market as quickly as possible. There's like loopholes. There's things that you need to get done for good reason, whether it's security or regulation, compliance. And like you suggested, F&B, and I think still very much a leader in terms of innovation to certain degrees. They really tried to move very quickly with those types of things and bring things to market as fast as possible, to the point where, you know, they've got a massive banking suite on offer. But it was good to be part of like just that stream and helping to deliver specific features. I can't even remember what the specific features were at this point. But like exciting to be part of that type of journey and that type of contribution.
And in terms of your next step? I mean, when did you realize you wanted to get into technology consulting?
As much as I can laud the innovation and the pace at an enterprise, a South African enterprise, I think it can be a little bit frustrating as well if you want to really get stuck into big, meaty problems. Because even though there's a lot of stuff that's coming down the pipeline, it sometimes gets throttled in terms of how quickly it can be executed and getting the paperwork, so to speak, sorted out. So there were times where you're not always as active in terms of project contribution, or there's a little bit of downtime. And it's great for like using that to learn and upskill and whatever else, or getting exposure to other areas in the bank. But those times kind of killed me. Like I wanted to be on it constantly, like
A sense of urgency.
Yeah. And I think I think it's just a case of being in a corporate ecosystem. Things don't always move as quickly as they would like, even for various reasons. So to me, I was like, how can I actually grow my career more and get exposed to a lot more opportunity? And also, I wanted to. I think I recognized at that point, as much as I liked the exposure to corporate, because honestly, when I joined F&B, I thought like I'll just stay here, right? Like this is a big enough place for me to play and be content or be happy and thriving. But it didn't really play out that way. So it was a case of where else can I look? And that's why consultancies became of interest. At that point, I was looking at BBD and Synthesis. I like Synthesis because they were smaller. They were 25 at that time.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was back in 2014. And I was like, a smaller, focused dev shop, that could be great. I also had tried out a Discovery and then had to pick between them. And ultimately, Synthesis, because of that smaller size, like even in my interview process, just learning a lot from the people, because that matters a lot. And I mean, that would be something I'd urge youngsters as well, is I know oftentimes when you're trying to get a job, you're thinking about what you can bring to the table, but it's also like turning that coin over and saying like, what can they bring back? Like, who can I learn from them? Where can I go with an organization? For me, like at Synthesis, it was clear. These guys have a passion for the craft. They are really excellent around what they do. They are focused around delivering excellence and achieving excellence, and was something that was very attractive for a youngster.
And I think that through line has remained to today. I mean, Synthesis does have a very, very good name in the market, and really very solid technical team. On the interview side, we also, myself and Nick, sit through a lot of interviews, as you'd imagine. And actually, to your point, the best candidates are the ones that ask the most questions. And when Nick and I leave an interview feeling like we've been interviewed, it's almost a better interview, and those people we prioritize, because you can see that they're interested and they want to learn about the company. What problems are they going to be solving? And they're kind of dating us as much as we're dating them. It's interesting you say that. It's always positive signal when people, if there's any students or new kind of people new to the job market, ask questions in the interview process.
Absolutely.
And then tell us about Synthesis. What did you discover there?
Yeah. When I joined Synthesis, I was still very much on the start Java track that I'd learned in high school. F&B as well was all about Java as a software engineer. So I joined as like a senior software engineer, focused at first to Java, but even through the interview process, they were very like clear about like, yeah, that's cool, but there's everything else in the world kind of thing. So my first project was very much Java focused, but like as soon as there was an opportunity to go and branch out and do something else like .NET, or I remember there were projects where we were even doing like C, or it would be Python or TypeScript or whatever else. You end up jumping into that and realizing like, I was on this Java path thinking about like, I'm just going to graduate through the ranks, just focused on that as one key technology and one key skill. And then you realize like, actually there's a hell of a lot more in terms of like the technology world that you can add value and learn and be interested about. So, graduating towards becoming like a full stack engineer, learning more around the database technology side, front end technology side, getting exposed to other languages, like that was massive for me. And then one of the key things, I think it was probably after maybe year 3, it was getting exposed to cloud technology. So I think here's where the timing was really good and in our favor. So this would have been around 2016. There wasn't a lot of people doing cloud. There were a lot of people really evaluating it with a real business intent. So we started to explore that, and we built out like a SaaS system that was completely cloud native. And I was part of that project, kind of ran that project. And it put me in a good position to actually build out a gap that was identified very clearly by the synthesis leadership that, well, there's not enough happening in this cloud space. Surely there should be a lot more that's been invested. And this is clearly another wave. As we're seeing with the AI wave, like cloud was a really good precursor to this back for South Africa, probably a bit later than the rest of the world, but let's call it that 2015, 2016. And just being able to jump into that and then build a capability to consult into our landscape. Yeah.
Maybe just let's double click into the cloud, because I think that's one of the key topics of today. What was the promise of cloud? What was before, like BC, before cloud?
Yeah.
And what was the promise of cloud? And have we seen that maybe jumping forward to today, maybe 15 years, 16 years later?
Yeah.
Is that promise being realized?
Yeah. So as I remember it back then, it was all about democratizing IT, is how they would describe it. So the simple analogy, and maybe South African one, which doesn't always translate as well, is instead of having your own electricity generation, outsource it to somebody else, kind of thing. And obviously in South Africa and Eskom may be contentious, but ultimately, like, being able to outsource your IT needs. And back then it was talking a lot about things like basic compute. So basic compute, storage, networking were the main kind of components or building blocks. So it was very much an infrastructure service play. And it's like, switch off your on-prem stuff, come across, move away from CapEx into OpEx. And you have a really good shared responsibility model to actually be able to run your systems without needing all of the skills around understanding how to tenant your own hardware, rack and stack, manage all of that kind of stuff, like move up a layer. So from a business perspective, it was, in the early days, was really that technology shift and approach. I think it was really a technology sale. Oftentimes it started in that way, part of the promise was you can repurpose your existing staff to learn these new skills. It's more modern for not just the business, but for the individual as well. But it would be a journey. And over time, ultimately, the promise became about business value, and it would often be sold as not just like a cost-saving opportunity in terms of like year-to-year investment or capital outlay, but it would also be things like staff productivity. Like, now you're no longer spending time doing things that are not really moving your business forward necessarily. Like buying equipment, racking and stacking and setting up and taking, weeks or months with procurement to do that, versus let me just click something on the Amazon console or do something through Terraform to automate it. That's a lot simpler in terms of being more productive as a team. And then I think the key one, there's another one just around like resilience. So they've obviously built an incredible amount of infrastructure, global infrastructure, to be able to grow a business quickly as well. So they've got lots of options. And in South Africa, we are now fortunate enough to have like multiple availability zones across South Africa that are, local and are good for our regulations as well. But I think the ultimate outcome was that business agility. So when we talk about getting to market faster, you can do that a lot faster with cloud than you ever could on premise. And that was like the key thing, the narrative.
Time to value.
Yeah, exactly. So for businesses and being more of a business pitch, where AWS especially felt very much like a technical pitch 10 plus years ago, but very much graduated into this business agility outcome for businesses.
There's a lot of parallels that we're seeing now in the AI wave, where we obviously are focused and specialize. One of the questions we get, which I'd imagine you would have had as well in the cloud when, going to implement a cloud solution, is around, security. I think security is definitely something that you would have come up against a lot of the time. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, security and then data were,
because everything's leaving your environment, and
I think there was also a bit of there's a bit of a mindset around it's more secure in our environment. It's like, is it really? But obviously you want to control and you want to manage your own kind of security boundaries and that kind of thing. I remember the initial discussions being very much around exactly that. And people wanting to be able to walk into their data centers and
CIOs and CTOs.
Like. Yeah, absolutely. Like executives and CISOs, etc., wanted to be able to do that and get that experience. So a lot of that, exactly to your point, was And the good part for us was we partnered with AWS early days. So you're kind of standing on the shoulders of giants with people who have really walked this and solved this from a global perspective, now trying to solve and help customers locally understand how it's as not a big of a problem. And I think it's ultimately was a lot of education around building that kind of certainty and surety, POCs, those types of things, so that people could actually get their hands on and really understand it. Because I think early days it was a case of don't know what we don't know around it, and it's scary. But ultimately walking the journey from those early days in terms of like education and proofs rather than just telling, like showing rather than telling, like I think that helped quite a lot. And post the security side, then it became a thing about like data compliance, all of those types of gaps as well. Latency was another big one around like always on apps and that kind of thing. So, and the key way to really solve for that we found that worked was just iterative proofs. So you build up, like pick a problem that's not too big, not too small. Like don't move an intranet website. Like move an application that is actually meaningful. Maybe it's internal still, but move it, test it, go through that iteration and onboard teams, onboard execs as you go. So it is a long journey. And to your point around the current similarities, it's again quite a long journey to make sure that people are on the AI bandwagon properly. And I think cloud was, again, a good precursor for this wave.
And one of the other promises is you know what you touched on earlier is you're repurposing your people.
Yeah.
And we all know that this is a promise of the Frontier Labs now, is that get your people to be doing higher order thinking, higher order tasks, move them away from manual work into more creative, more high value, high agency work.
Yeah.
I'm sure the cloud providers, the hyperscalers were pitching the same story.
Yeah.
What was the reality of what happened back then? Because a lot of our listeners also are very curious and have questions around their job security and the longevity of their careers.
Yeah.
And maybe drawing a parallel from the past, even though it's not a predictor of the future, what actually did materialize with all of those DBAs and all of the IT professionals?
Yeah. So absolutely, it was fear, uncertainty, doubt for those individuals as well. Because it's like, well, hang on, my job is X, Y, and Z, very in the mind is very much on-prem focused. And you're like, but where's my future in this cloud world? We're talking about going fully cloud native or cloud first even. I think locally, has that really materialized in terms of many organizations moving wholly away from on-premise? Not really. I think there's always an opportunity, and again with regulation and things like disaster recovery, having other sites and other avenues in terms of like recovering from a disaster. So a lot of on-premise work still continues. It's not necessarily going all the way across. And then in the cases where things have moved, it was just a good opportunity to repurpose those individuals because, and I think this is the same with AI, is people have a really good context and understanding of your business. So bring that on the journey. So it's not a case of, the technology's changed. There's no real point in bringing a role across. A lot of people I saw repurpose their skills and go through these upskilling journeys, going from like entry levels into understanding of cloud, all the way into like this power user kind of, like AWS is borrowing from their certification terminology, becoming a professional in understanding the technology. So it's, like the DBA example, it might be you're used to running or administering and setting up databases on premise. What does that mean in terms of doing it in the cloud? And when does it make sense to manage your own cloud database versus, let's say, wholly outsourcing it to a kind of PaaS solution instead? So like all of those things actually became really good ways for people to prove value as well and move a business outcome forward while upgrading their skills, which is actually, I think that skill stacking is quite critical. I actually, on that particular point, I do worry, especially with AI and people building stuff, vibe coding especially, is you completely skip all of the basics and the foundations. You like gloss over it because it's like, it's working software. And I think there are various definitions for working. I do think like there is benefit in people who have seen, like how things worked before, as long as they can level up into how things work today as well. I have seen the other side where it's like in the cloud narrative where it's like, I'm not going to learn that stuff, or that doesn't apply to me, where it has backfired. So I think it is a case of being open-minded to where an organization's going, what they need, and what you need as well, and making sure there's a good compromise around that. I always think there's benefit in upskilling and learning, though. I mean, it just makes sense in our space, especially.
That's quite interesting. So the younger like engineers coming into the working world now, your kind of guidance would be conscious of where we come from, basically.
Yeah.
It's unfair to assume that the guys are ever going to actually write code, the new generations coming in.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they should be, but
I think they should understand it. I think they don't necessarily need to now. Before, when you'd learn a new language, you'd often start with a hello world example. You'd literally start with a little bit of code, and you would you spin it up, you'd start it up, you'd probably write out the syntax yourself. To your point, people aren't necessarily doing that anymore. But I think understanding why it looks a certain way can be valuable. To what extent? I'm interested to see how much that plays out still. But I think there is value in learning the basics and the foundations here.
I was having this conversation with someone the other day, actually, talking about vibe coding and almost like the fundamentals of software, for young sort of graduate engineers. And I mean, we obviously both did actuarial science, and in your first lecture, they give you this little calculator, which is a reverse Polish notation calculator called an HP12C. I think it was first made in like the 70s. And for 4 years, you have to use this calculator, and you have to do everything from scratch, or every single one of the, call it like financial maths and statistical proofs and notations that you use. You almost have to define them from first principles. And I mean, obviously, when you enter the working world, you never have to use an HP12C calculator. You never have to put pen to paper. You're using SAS and Excel and a lot of these big computational engines to do all of your statistical analyses. But having those fundamentals is super, super important. And I think it will probably become a lot more important, in the areas where, now, these coding agents are giving us a lot more leverage, right? And I think it can compound a lot of the issues to your point, in terms of reliability of code, in terms of security of code. So I think that's super interesting, and I completely agree with you. I mean, I think the fundamentals should not go away. I don't think your people in marketing and sales and design are going to be developing enterprise grade software. But maybe coming back to cloud, because I'm quite interested to almost understand and unpack from your perspective the parallels in what we're seeing in this new AI wave with the cloud wave that you sort of rode, and you were sort of you had a front row seat to it. Maybe let's talk about the pitfalls of cloud. So I'd like to understand, where did the promise fall short? I mean, there was from what I've seen over the last couple of years, and especially post-COVID, for a lot of the companies that had made the migration fully to cloud, there's almost been a pullback to now say, okay, well, we potentially do need to be racking our own servers again. So, I mean, where did the promise of cloud fall short? And potentially now, as a follow-on, which you can touch on after, is the new AI wave exacerbating those issues? And it's almost now the pendulum has swung a little bit too far in the one direction, it's going to move back in the other direction. And this AI wave is going to accelerate that swing back.
Yeah, I think one of the main pitfalls was definitely the economics of cloud. And I think people, and in the large enterprise space especially, there were business cases that were drafted up for entire estates that took months, even longer. And there's a lot of great tooling involved to help to estimate, etc., moving the stack across. So full application stacks, and in an enterprise organization, there's hundreds, sometimes thousands of applications that need to move. And the economics of doing it around a business case seems solid. Like maybe it's not as much as people had hoped, I think, oftentimes, and I think the same with AI, people are hoping for a lot more return out of it, or maybe the costs are going to be vastly reduced or whatever else, and it doesn't necessarily pan out that way, because it's all about how you use it and how you carve up what is the right thing to move, what is the right, in the AI world, it's what is the right use case for AI in your business. For cloud, it was, what is the right application? Because some apps actually aren't good candidates, is the honest truth, for moving across. And I'm sure in AI, we'll see a lot of those where it's like, this is actually maybe not the best use case. And if we just tie it back to like the economics angle, it's because financially it doesn't make sense. So you see a lot of people who got stuck in the cloud journey where there's a lot of cost sprawl. So a simple example is, I want my people to learn how to use the cloud, or a team. Here's an open AWS account, go wild. Yeah, you can go pretty wild in the cloud. And I'm sure with the AI side as well, with an unlimited kind of token budget, you can go pretty wild there too. So you hear the stories of like people who, the agents that are being released every, maybe not even every 6 months, maybe even sooner.
Couple of weeks.
Like some of these things are pretty crazy in terms of just how quickly it advances. But ultimately the cost, like the token economics around it as well, are quite a lot higher. So people who are not well enabled or empowered to use the technology will just default to, well, this one does the job the best. And then you've got like the most high-powered agent doing LS commands on your computer. It's probably not a good example, good use case. So it's like being able to actually understand the technology enough and the unit economics behind it so you can make the most out of it. And the biggest pitfall for cloud that I see will translate for AI as well is around those kind of token economics of how you use it and how you set the right limits. And you see so many examples of people like, here's my AI budget. Oh, I used it in 2 months. Whoops.
The Uber guys.
Yeah, like there's several. So I think that pitfall is 100% carrying out because I think people aren't enabling, like giving people access to AI and AI tooling is not, the job's not done then. So just saying you've got access to Claude, improve your workflow. It's like, I think it is an iterative journey to help people understand how to use it, when to use it, etc. Like setting up some good guardrails, which I think if I see in the cloud example, and I think it'll play out with AI as well, you're going to burn your fingers or your whole arm off, maybe, and then you'll learn and iterate and change. And I think it can be avoided, but oftentimes it's a case of teams learn by doing. So maybe it is unavoidable, but that will definitely play out.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for those that have been listening to the Assembly Line podcast. The idea behind the Assembly Line is effectively to disseminate the corridor conversations, the water cooler conversations, the coffee chats that we have with leading experts across the globe, really, and the people that are really building and moving the forefront of technology, cloud, AI in our space. And we really want to disseminate this knowledge to people that wouldn't have access. And so for that purpose, please subscribe, be attentive, give us feedback, and enjoy. Were there any examples of catastrophic costs that where you saw it almost tanked a business, the costs running away?
Cloud, no, not to the point of it was so wildly out of the business case.
Yeah,
that people were,
but it was enough to cause alarm.
Yeah, like there's bull shock definitely.
Yeah,
but it wasn't a case of bull shock to the point of like my business is at risk. Yeah, and I think AI likely will be along the same lines.
I mean, AI, like from a grassroots bottom up perspective, giving everyone a $20 a month account is somewhat contained, except for the caveat that the users within a business now using AI versus the guys that had an AWS console is much vaster. So you've got all business units basically able to use large language models for their business functions. Yeah. So it's like 80-90% of the people in a business can now use these tools, whereas getting access to AWS was probably 1% of the company power users. Yeah. So there is a bit of a difference there.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. And I think because of the way it's like the subscription model around AI and the fact that you've got things like usage limits, etc., that will definitely help protect your average user, average consumer. But then when it comes back to developers, who obviously I'm a lot closer aligned with, and being one of them, speaking openly, it's like you can have too much of a good thing. And I think to that earlier point about writing code, I remember there was a day I'm in the Google ecosystem, so I'm using anti-gravity a lot for my build out. And I remember the days where the service just wasn't working, where I was like, I can't code now. Because it's like,
I'd rather wait for my
I
tokens
would
to come
rather
back.
wait. Yeah, or if the service is an outage or whatever else, it was a case of like, if I spent 4 hours trying to do this task that I was planning to do, I'm not going to get it done. So let me go and spend my 4 hours elsewhere. So I think maybe there's another unintended consequence around our reliance on the solutions themselves, on our tooling, that can actually hinder rather than help. So interesting learning on my side, definitely.
I think maybe, just a comment going back on that swing back of the pendulum from cloud adoption back to on-prem. I think the bull case from my perspective, and what I'm seeing a lot of our customers through conversations with a lot of our customers, is really just in as the mix of a lot of the compute that's required to serve even enterprise level applications goes from more CPU based to GPU based. Just a hard constraint on GPUs and getting access to these chips. I mean, we've got 1 or 2 customers who they've got their own on-prem data centers, and they literally rack their own servers. And we've been asked to actually go out and procure GB 300s, Blackwells, or H100s, 200s in South Africa, and it's literally impossible to find these chips. So I think as that share of compute grows more towards GPUs, I think enterprises are really going to struggle to really get in front of the line. If you look at AWS and all of the hyperscalers, I mean, they've got massive procurement deals with the likes of NVIDIA. I mean, good luck to you as a large enterprise in South Africa getting in front of AWS. And on top of that, I mean, if you think of second and third order effects, all of these hyperscalers are developing their own chips, right? And I think now everyone's seeing the craziness in like high bandwidth memory and what's happening in the constraint there. So I mean, these guys are going to be developing their own chips, which is going to constrain NVIDIA. And I mean, a lot of the hyperscalers also don't even sell chips retail. I mean, AWS has got Inferentia and Trainium. I think that the second bull case towards cloud is as call it your foundation models. I mean, the big labs are all getting commoditized completely by the open source models, and I think it's largely somewhat deserved, because I mean, these guys are sitting at 80-90% gross margins, and I think it's really just unsustainable from a token cost perspective. I mean, we're looking at it internally, and we're not even a massive business to say, well, how do we contain these costs? I mean, it's ballooned by over 600-700 times for us, just over the last 6 months since the advent of Claude Code. So I think as more enterprises look to contain those costs, they'll look to adopt more of open source, and I think all of that value will then reaccrue back down to the hyperscalers in the form of self-hosted models, in the form of like Foundry or Bedrock. GCP's got Vertex. I mean, there's just going to be a massive sort of drainage of value from the foundation model labs down to the infrastructure layer again. Obviously, NVIDIA, and I mean, they've completely monopolized the chip layer and the memory layer with Samsung and all the South Korean guys. And then it'll go back up into the application layer, which I think we're seeing now with the likes of Claude Code and Claude Design and Claude Finance and Claude Legal. It sort of is also a broader conversation about sovereignty around, and we've had this conversation many times, is, should enterprises feel comfortable giving away their IP and their alpha through these APIs to the foundation model labs, for them to then you almost like imbibe that within their weights and then rent and lease that back to you. We're seeing it obviously as a very big consideration now, where a lot of our customers won't use Anthropic and OpenAI because of that IP leakage issue. But yeah, broadly, I mean, I just think that the hyperscalers are very, very well positioned to sort of capture a lot of the value in this whole AI wave.
I mean, they've got a hard moat, right? There's massive capex that they have, whereas the frontier models. I had this thought over the weekend, actually, was that if you go back before the large language model proliferation, if you were doing a data science like prediction model, if you were building a prediction model, whatever, all the models you'd use are all open source. There was nothing that really had there was no proprietary nature, and there was no business model to selling a model. before the LLMs came into play. And now the application, or the main use, is the chat interface. So that was like the kind of commercialization of model as a service. But like, is it really that valuable that you're going to pay so much more for an interface? Is that going to come down over time?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure. I mean, I know a lot of it is talking about the UI for AI as well, which chat is predominantly what it's become, chat and voice, I suppose, nowadays. People using a bit more of. I think if we look at, like, we fast forward and we consider things like large enterprises, and I don't know how far enterprises locally will take it around, like MCP servers and things like that, so your agents can connect in to your environments. And you can really run everything, like from your voice assistant that connects everything in your life. I think that could be an interesting outcome, ultimately, that we get towards. So it becomes like completely agnostic. Well, you'd pick an agent, I suppose, that you would want to use, but then being able to connect into everything around what you do. So instead of your banking interface being an app, maybe it just becomes, hey, Gemini, transfer X, Y, and Z, or do whatever. Like, I think that could be quite novel and interesting. How long that would take for us to get there locally, I think would be quite a while. But I'm pretty sure there'll be some smart fintechs who are working on those types of problems as well. So yeah, it's an interesting, like, and this is the pace of how everything is moving, and consumers trying to keep up with it, which I think in general are doing pretty well. I mean, if I look at even in my family, my mother-in-law made quite a funny thing. She was asking me, like, how do I do this thing in Copilot? I'm like, what's Copilot? She's like, no, this, look over here. Oh, Copilot. Oh, yes. let's talk through what that is.
It's a good name, actually.
I can see how she got there. But it's like, I think just the ability of, even though it is a very simple interface, it's an intuitive interface, and being able to leverage it quite effectively, and what the broad application of being able to use that integrated into your life, I think it could be quite fascinating for the future of AI and its use.
Let's talk about the people side of all of this, because we've spoken quite a bit about the tech, but your time at Synthesis, you had quite a prolific career, and you're a very humble guy. So you talk it down, but
maybe why don't you also tell the story of how we met, Darryl, and sort of PJ's initial relationship with Synthesis. I think you're probably best positioned to tell the story.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I remember it was pre-COVID, 2019.
2019.
Yeah. So, and back then, being in that consulting kind of business and Synthesis, ultimately we grew rapidly. Like I mentioned, 2014, 25 people. When I left 18 months ago, it was, so what's it, 2024, we had grown to about 300 plus, 350. And part of the scale around that was we realized talent, like getting the right level of talent, or even incubating the talent, even though like we went through the usual grad program kind of thing to get, like level up our people over time, get them into senior roles. It's a long journey. So, and trying to get that talent locally, not very easy to source. So I remember we were looking at different avenues around how we could actually extend our team, make sure we still get really good quality, align around, because things that are important obviously in delivery is things like culture. Time zone helps, especially when you're working in like an 8 to 5 kind of environment. Pre-COVID was more important to be in the business hour kind of window. But then, meeting you guys, and you had a very novel model around like offshore, and it was Ukraine specifically from a talent perspective. And we had never considered it, honestly. I think back then it was, and we had people in our business as well who had tried and worked with the Indian offshore model. So that was kind of the one that we had considered around like a build, operate, transfer model for that. But I think just being able to pick the right partners to help you extend your capability and land into the right types of opportunities to build your business, like that became pretty critical. And that's where we first started engaging around that opportunity and getting a few people into our business. And it actually set the scene for a lot of how we would partner, because you learn a lot through those partner initiatives to figure out like what works, what doesn't work. We were new into it as well, because we had always only hired through our own talent kind of acquisition. So yeah, it was good. It was good lesson around how, if you pick the right partners, you can really get the right outcomes and make sure like your customers are satisfied with it as well, and without like diminishing your capability. Yeah.
Yeah, the quality is very important when you're partnering, because you're introducing another culture into your environment, and you need to make sure that your incentives are aligned, the quality is aligned, the work ethic is aligned, the skill base is where you need it to be.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it's your name on the line.
Yeah.
As the the primary service provider.
Yeah. And you're asking for a lot of trust from your customers that whoever you bring in to their environment is going to represent what they expect. So yeah, 100%.
The first time I met Darryl, let it be said on the record, it was probably like 11:30 at night. We had been invited to there was like a 24-hour hackathon at the office, at the Synthesis office in Melrose. And you were like hunched over your laptop trying to figure something out, and you just had the AWS console open. and you had 6 engineers looking over your shoulder, and you were trying to figure something out or fix something that was broken in like a deployment script or something. And that was the first time I met you in the engine room. So it was an interesting foray into your world.
Still the best way to write software, I reckon. A group of people war rooming it out, building stuff.
Which is, it's like the allure of smaller businesses, right? There's a very special, essence that you have in the first. When you're a team of 20 people, there's like, you feel very tightly knit with all of those people, and you're all on this mission to. It's like a conspiracy theory that there's 20 people in a room that are all in on it. It's like a mini cult, and you're trying to solve something, and then you kind of need to figure out how you scale that.
Yeah.
As the business grows and the people grow.
Yeah.
How did you manage that at Synthesis? I mean, you started, cloud was nothing. It wasn't a thing, and then you grew the practice.
It was me and a guy, if I remember right, like just a couple of engineers learning how things worked. And I think ultimately it ties back to, again, good partners. At that time it was AWS, who were trying to break in as well. Like they didn't have a local office. They had representation through the Middle East who had come in. And some sales, kind of field sales, that were just trying to educate and engage with customers. And I think just leveraging that partner network really helps, working together. So I remember later we described it as like this three-legged stool, and it's yourself, your partner, and your customer. And you take one away and it becomes an unstable setup. And I think that really helped in terms of being able to build the practice, because again, you're on the shoulders of giants around some really great technology, actually.
Yeah.
With not a lot of representation locally that you can provide. And then looking at how, as their platform and technology grows, as their collateral improves, etc., around positioning locally as well as internationally, how can you leverage that to actually build something meaningful? And we started out with, of course, helping clients on the journey. So a lot of the cloud practice at that time was, how do we do the basic entry-level assessments around, is cloud right for you, what it would look like, etc., that kind of thing. We would go through the process to mobilize, is how we termed it. So setting up the landing zone, networking, security, figuring out all of the hard plumbing bits, like answering a lot of those questions, coming in with like patternized ways to do it. So you really can drop and tweak based on what that customer needed, and tiered based on enterprise scale business versus SMB. Because we even worked with like solopreneur-sized organizations, which again was a good test of our ability to execute in that space with what we had built. Over time, like the meat of it was really migration, modernization. So that leaned into our skills, because you're building new apps using cloud technology, or you're migrating existing applications across to the cloud, even if it's VM to VM type migration. And then lastly, that last piece was management. So like creating a managed services practice to be able to do this as well. Because throughout this journey, customers are coming on the journey, upskilling their own teams. It takes time. So we had like a very co-create driven model that says, we'll work with you, we'll partner with you to deliver this. And we would also create a lot of those playbooks and standard operating procedures for you to take over if you ever need to. But ultimately, obviously, our intention was build a really good service, provide a lot of value, make it priced so that it actually becomes a no-brainer to just keep going. So we created a lot of our business then became about like onboarding new customers, getting them into that kind of sales channel around like the lifetime value projects, managed services. We resold AWS consumption as well. We had a few licensing products. So that really helped to create the runway to keep growing our team. And yeah, I think it was 7 years from myself and the guy, Martin was his name, to getting to just under 100, including like the contractor relationships that we had.
Really, I think the IP for you guys was in the ability to take a customer across that journey. So the technological investment was done by AWS or the hyperscalers. But where you are valuable, and what we do as well in PGO, is being that last mile for customers, understanding their business, understanding how to build a roadmap for them to safely, because they're running their own business. They're banking experts or telco experts or insurance experts. They're not technology experts, even though I think a lot of these enterprises are hiring and building. They are becoming tech businesses, actually, all of them. And they have been on this journey for a long time. The people side is very important to how you execute on all of this, is based on what I'm hearing. And that kind of leads me to, my next kind of, or your next part of your journey, and something really exciting that you've now embarked on. So you had a very successful career at Synthesis. Everything that you've said throughout this discussion touches on the human element of tech. And I think leading into what you're now doing, and what was the moment that you decided you want to go and try something on your own, build Octant? Maybe tell us what Octant is.
Sure.
And ultimately, I think you described it as the ultimate, life is the ultimate RPG game. And I really love that. And we're all running on autopilot, and you want to give us control.
So I think maybe a bit cliched, but turned 40, really had a deep bit of reflection around what I was doing with my life and the trajectory and what I was going to do for the next, like I don't plan to retire. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? And one thing that crystallized it for me last year throughout this kind of thought exercise was, if I look at two versions of myself, the 8-year-old version, the 80-year-old version, would they be proud or happy with what I'm currently doing? And of course, the 8-year-old version, like if I had to have a conversation with that kid, he would be like, why aren't you a Formula One driver or something ridiculous, right? But at the same time, there were already values and principles installed around like things that you want to achieve, even at a young age. And then the 80-year-old version, obviously, hopefully, a lot wiser. I mean, stupid gets old too, but like a lot wiser around learned experience, would be like, is this it? Don't you want to do more? Don't you want to contribute more? Isn't there more for you, kind of thing? And I was always a big believer and a proponent for self-actualization within a team. Like the whole thing around living up to your potential, making sure you're doing as much as is as authentic to you. So even with working in team environments, we used to do exercises around trying to understand that as people. And it was like just always so interesting. You'd get the people coming out of university who are just like, "Hey man, I just want to buy my first car," or "I want to pay off my student loan," or, it's not necessarily the most novel, change the world type stuff, but it's important goals to them as individuals. And I've seen it in my own life, like 20s versus 30s, like your goals shift and change. Like becoming a dad, like that puts things into perspective as well. Like your goals completely shift. You're like, forget whatever I was trying to do as an individual. It's like, how do I give my two little girls like the best life possible? More experiences, helping them to learn the right things as well, instilling the right values, all of that kind of stuff. But I saw that like repeating, working with people. And oftentimes in those discussions, and we live in the age of distraction. People are just, I'm going to say, they're too busy to actually focus and create goals that are meaningful to them. And before they know it, it's like months have gone by, or years sometimes have gone by, with like days bleeding into the next and kind of everything becoming fuzzy. And I think that's an absolute travesty, to be wasting one's potential or what somebody wants to do with their life. I know when you're in your 20s, like life seems super long, but it's really not. It's the longest thing you'll ever do, sure.
Yeah.
But it's like a blip in terms of like in terms of like the universe, in terms of like the concept of time itself. So it's like, how do you do? And I think we owe it to ourselves to do something meaningful with that. So, and one of the constraints I had working in a business was it always felt like it only really truly help the people that I worked with. So it was always the four walls of the business. And I was like, how can I do this broader? Like I built a lot of this exercise. I use it personally myself. How can I take this out to the world and see if it does any good? And that's where Octant came from. So it was really, here's my framework that's helped me to consolidate how I think about what a good life could mean, like in terms of being in a thrive state and really leveling up. If you're familiar with like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you're like trying to get all the way up to that self-actualized top. And I think it even expanded it's like things like self-transcendence as like a explanation of it as well. But like very simply, like let's get beyond our basis needs and let's really think about how we can contribute and create value in the world and ask the difficult questions about whether we really are. And the life being the ultimate RPG slogan was really, I think, and it leans into obviously the gamified aspect of it, but it's just a different mindset. It's like if, like you see people who are really engaged around, you say things that aren't necessarily going to move the needle for them. Like maybe it is a game that they're playing virtually themselves. Like you can get really into that, but a lot of people aren't really into moving their lives forward. Like they really get stuck into ruts, don't know how to get out because they're not actively doing that thought exercise to think about where do they want to be and what are the steps. And they're slow and sometimes painful and sometimes it's a step forward and two steps back. But it's like, how do you make those steps to move towards something that's meaningful to you? And that's ultimately what I wanted to create with Octant. And why it's B2C is try and get it to as many people as possible. Get them to experience a different way of achieving their goals. Because I think a lot of people actually don't have systems to achieve their goals. So never mind doing the exercise to understand where they want to be, they don't have a system to actually put that into action. And, to pick on a New Year's resolution fad, which is I want to get in shape. And January, the gyms are full, and February, there's no one there, or it's the usual suspects. It's because there's no system to really grow and commit and stay motivated, maybe is the wrong word.
Like true to yourself, true to your own promises.
And it's also because our age is one of, we want like really quick returns on stuff. And it's just like a lot of the worthwhile goals in your life probably aren't that. They take days, weeks, months to really get there. Like even this entrepreneurship journey that I'm on now, it's not I wasn't expecting it to be an overnight success. Like I knew it was going to be a journey, and it's a journey that you just got to commit to and keep trying, keep learning, and keep ultimately trying to move forward. And Octant is trying to help people to do that across what I call the 8 slices of their life, everything from their body to their work, to their wealth, to their soul. Like just think.
What are the
the
8 slices?
So it starts with body at the top. So ultimately focus on your health, like put on your own oxygen mask kind of thing, because you really can't do a lot. And I think people neglect their health a lot more these days. I don't know if it's because you've got all of these drugs and fads and trends.
Peptides.
That can course correct.
GLPs.
Yeah. So
supplements. Yeah.
Is that the right way? Debatable. But body is a key element. Wealth is a secondary one, is the next in terms of the 8 slices. And I think it's ultimately, it is important. Like if you're going to be able to achieve things in life, we do live in a world that requires, material input, like finances to actually be able to get there. It's not cheap, even in South Africa. And if you look overseas, obviously a lot worse. But it's like having a good understanding of what, financial and wealth, what wealth ultimately looks like. So wealth is the second one. The next one is work, because that ultimately ties back. Like I think in my life, personally, work has been in my career, and I'm trying to graduate it into a calling, something that I feel deeply about, that I can give back to the world. Like I think that is a really important, purposeful aspect of life. And like I mentioned in my 20s, I wasn't really that purposeful about it. I was just like, let me just get a gig and learn some stuff and take it from there. And I think people should really think about where they want to be and what they want to do. Like when you mention the guys who ask questions in the interviews, like are they thinking mindfully around why they want to join your business? Because that alignment in terms of mission, I think you can get a lot more done when people are aligned in terms of the personal kind of interest and the organizational one. That makes sense. Next one is social. So this is an area where I dip quite badly as an introvert. I don't always pay enough attention to it, which I'm trying to improve now. And I think as an entrepreneur, like the networking side is quite critical. Like you can't do it in a vacuum. B2C, by the way, was really tough for me personally because I thought it would be great. Like just let me disappear into a cave and build stuff. Awesome. And I'm going to learn a whole bunch around like AI native development practices, properly hands-on. I'm going to get something out quickly. And I'd managed to do that, like moving the needle quite fast. But you learn B2C, it's really hard to get feedback from people. So, you know, they vote with their feet. They vote with, I'm going to try your app, I'm going to use it for 2 minutes.
Wallet and feet.
And I'm going to delete it. Yeah. So it's like, it was interesting also coming from a services organization where you can literally go to your customer and be like, hey, how am I doing? And they'll give you feedback. Whereas in B2C, so if you are targeting to build something in B2C or go to B2C, that was an interesting learning for me that I didn't think through properly, is the feedback loop. It's hard, actually, and it's a bit lonely because of that. So social is, I think, an important one, because if you look at like, even like the Blue Zone kind of research about people, age and longevity, that social community side is so critical, actually. Whether you're introverted, I'm introverted, but whether you're introverted or not, like it matters. So what does that mean in terms of your, let's say your 3 to 5 closest people or broader kind of network? Up from then is kind of mind, is how I term it, so learning. I think that growth mindset, are you constantly learning? And it could be personal, even professional kind of pursuits, but always look at how you're going to actually grow from, I think like that growth mindset is quite critical. And I think oftentimes we forget it. Even things like Alex Omozi talks about this in his videos, where it's like, is it education or is it entertainment? And I think oftentimes you come out, like I've done it personally, like you watch something that's supposed to be educational, but it becomes entertainment because you don't apply it, kind of thing. So like how you applying yourself, whether it's through reading or podcasts or any of that kind of thing to grow yourself. After that is play. So what are you doing from a hobbies perspective? I think oftentimes people neglect quality downtime. You know, like if I look at the average week, like I learned this with a lot of the team members, they were like, weekends were recovery. So it wasn't really about like, let me apply myself to something that's useful and helps to develop a skill or helps me unwind or any of that kind of stuff. It was just like, I'm going to crash for this weekend and dread coming back on Monday type of thing.
Just be ready for Monday.
Yeah, you're just like burnt out ultimately. So I think like just focusing on that aspect, like what gives you energy, like come back to that and really think about that properly. And then there's soul, which is, I'm not religious myself. I know maybe that label can maybe be contentious, but I would describe it as like connectedness with the universe. Like how do you feel from that general standpoint or from a spiritual standpoint, that kind of thing, and just connecting again to yourself. Maybe again, edge of distraction, maybe getting away from the phone, getting away from the device for a bit, getting out into nature, like those types of things really help. But are we doing enough of it? Maybe not. And then the last one is actually comes a little bit soon, is heart. Like from a family circle perspective, what are you doing? I mean, I think a lot of family ties get neglected nowadays. Families are more nuclear, so they're spending more time in the same proximity, but not necessarily spending time together. Like, have you ever seen like going out in a restaurant and everyone's on their phone type of thing? It's like, make time for meaningful connection with people you care about. And then ultimately, the whole point of that, the 8 slices, is to recognize that each of those slices, the best way I've seen it described is rubber ball or glass ball. Like, know which one is which. And oftentimes people say, health is glass, it doesn't change, but I think they're all fluid. Like, there are moments in your life where your health, like you're really doing well physically. You can really grind, you can really do something difficult. You can do the Ironman type thing. But probably if you did that too often, it wouldn't work out as well. But it's like understanding when those slices go from rubber to glass and they need to be protected. Because if you drop them, obviously it's going to be a lot harder to pick up the pieces or even recover. And you see it oftentimes with people who neglect maybe health or their personal downtime, etc., in the working world, with heavy deadlines and everything else, it's like health complications and things like that. So it's really trying to give people a platform to understand the different areas of life that actually work in like an integrated fashion to help you get towards what you want to be doing. So yeah, trying to look at like a holistic way to think about goal setting, habit creation, and getting more out of life ultimately.
And track that over time.
So a lot of it is ultimately habit tracking and how often are you doing things, because I think those small consistent steps compound into big results and they can't be overlooked. So like on a health journey, oftentimes it's like just committing to regular practice and you won't see results in a week or maybe 2 weeks, but in a year you'll be a different person kind of thing. And I know oftentimes, like you mentioned, peptides, it's like people looking for some shortcuts to get there, but there's like downsides to a lot of these things. So like doing the good research and making sure it's the right thing for you. But ultimately it's commitment. And how do you do it? Like find a system, or whatever that system is, find a system to track that you're on the right track towards the destination you want to get to. And I mean, a simple analogy there is if a plane takes off and goes in a specific direction, but unknowingly goes 1 degree off to the left or right, like you'll end up in a completely different location after a few hours of travel. And I think life ends up being like that as well. So, yeah.
That's very inspiring. It's given me some mental models for rubber balls and glass balls. I
Don't drop the glass ones.
Yeah, so I can definitely say maybe I've got some glass balls in those octants.
Yeah.
Some of them feel very rubber at the moment.
Yeah.
But you do make me think about even my own kind of spheres where potentially they're lacking.
Yeah. And I think it's too easy to neglect them. Like life makes it way too easy to neglect it.
Well, we're in like this like hyper productive culture. And you get the sense that like if you're not working like 6-7 days a week,
you feel guilty.
After hours, you feel very guilty. Yeah.
Which is crazy. So I do think like the younger generations are onto something, trying to actually slow things down, trying to be more purposeful, trying to have meaning behind what they do, not just jumping in and having a career for 40 years and retiring type of thing. Not to say anything wrong with that. Like growing up in that generation or in my family as well. I might have been on that same path myself if I hadn't just introspected a little bit more about what I truly want. Oh.
All I would say is come to Europe, because there's not much of a sense of urgency here. I've felt a lot of a slowdown since I've been here. Just the perspective on life is and it's a beautiful thing. I mean, like you touched on it, Darryl. The blue zones are here for a reason. But yeah, there's a lot that obviously we can unpack and potentially in another discussion. But it's the whole James Clear expression. You don't rise to the heights of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Is that correct? Exactly that. I've got one question for you, and maybe we can filter these into the rapid fires, because I know Dee is going to want to cover them in an instant. But is AI, because I mean I think what you've discussed is really putting structure into your life, and then obviously having the agency to act on it, on that structure, and obviously be quite disciplined. There's a whole lot that goes into the system in terms of consistency. But in your perspective, is AI giving us, or is it taking away agency from us? Is it making us have more agency in our lives, or not?
I think it is. Like before, when you're trying to get help and you were looking, you'd look at the usual sources. You either Google something, or you'd look on YouTube, or you'd look on your feed or whatever else, trying to solve a specific problem. I think AI helping you to contextualize what that problem is and giving you something that's a lot more tailored from like maybe not always the best sources. So maybe you always need to double check, but being able to actually have a tailored conversation, putting in your very specific situation, environment, circumstances, getting something a bit more tailored, I think that definitely does help. But it comes back to asking the right questions, and being able to actually challenge as well what comes back, not just taking it for granted that it's come back with like a really great prescription for you, so to speak, to, I don't know, go on a nutritional cleanse or
there's a lot of confirmation bias that can happen.
Yeah, so I think it does help, but it also needs to be kind of fact checked and help with some like do a bit of research around it, but it can fast track the journey. And if you look at like the example I was talking now with the 8 slices, getting into each of those different pieces and really introspecting them individually, and then also holistically in terms of a context, I think that can really be quite helpful. So save a lot of time and give you some direction so you can get started. Because oftentimes I think people struggle with that direction. What do I do next?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Well, we encourage everyone listening to go and download the app and
Thanks.
and play around with it.
Adopt a system, honestly. Try something.
Yeah.
Just have something. Don't just wing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it works for some people, and maybe that's how they prefer to do it.
Have you heard of the guy that's on about retard maxing?
No.
I might get cancelled for saying this, but
No.
but there's a whole movement, and I think it was Mark Andreessen that actually kind of put the internet onto this guy.
Okay.
And his whole thing is, don't be hypercritical of yourself. Don't, like, introspection is bad.
Okay.
It's like the very opposite kind of thinking to
I
traditionally.
must check it out. Learn more.
And he's saying it's kind of nihilistic, but he says whether you go to work or not, it doesn't really matter. Like, as long as you're happy and you're doing something that you like gives you a bit of meaning. And even if it doesn't, at the end of the day, it also doesn't matter. Don't take yourself too seriously. He doesn't mean to say don't be not thoughtful about what you do, but lingering too much in the past is not a good thing.
Sure.
I think retard maxing, my interpretation of it is more just around taking action. And I think like that there's a lot of analysis paralysis nowadays. People are very anxious. We're overloaded with information, and oftentimes they can actually take agency away from people because they think, oh my God, first of all, what are people going to think? And his perspective on that is like, no one really cares about you. No one thinks about you. They only care about themselves and think about themselves. And really, like, how do you just take action? It is very, very interesting.
Yeah, that part I agree with. Like, if I look at my entrepreneurial journey, if I cared about, like, as part of the career side of what I've done, it was always like, what is the next thing, right? Like, if you're in that career mode, you're like, what's the next rung in the ladder? How am I going to, and yes, there can be the noble side, like, how do I create more value? How do I work with more people? How do I help more? All of that kind of stuff. But if I had cared too much about, wait a minute, this is not climbing the ladder. This is a completely different ladder, and I'm starting pretty low down. And it was a case of, what would people think of me? I don't think I would have been able to do this at all. Like, I probably would have stayed, maybe stuck is the wrong word, but I would have stayed where I was. And I think if you do really want to make something that's like transformational change, you really need to think about, like that exercise I mentioned about the 8-year-old and 80-year-old, maybe just focus on what would they think. At the end of the day, if nothing really matters, what was your opinion of what you did with your life, those 80 years, or maybe you're lucky and you get 100 plus kind of thing. And hopefully they're like really good mobile years for you. It's like a really good quality of life and like that you get out of it. But I think it's like important that people really stay attuned to what do they think of themselves. And that's got to be more important, surely, than what somebody else thinks. Because like going on this journey otherwise would be really, really tough. Or trying to do the bold in public stuff would be really tough, because I've never done videos that I put out onto YouTube for people to just watch. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to get laughed at, and the reality
is, what are we doing?
And the reality is you're going to suck at everything that you start at. But hopefully at day 100, you suck less, kind of thing. So it's just like, put yourself out there, try things, learn, grow, pivot as you need to. I think a lot of people are stuck in a rut where they're just unwilling to do that for various reasons. And I don't think they've, again, done the exercise to understand what's the worst thing that could happen if you try. Like when I do that exercise in my personal life, it's like, okay, I exhaust some savings. And if I'm really desperate, I'll beg, borrow, steal some money to keep it going. I'll sell a car. If I really wanted to get down there, I'll downgrade something else in my lifestyle, etc., that kind of thing. And what's the absolute worst case? I'll just go back into the job market. It's really not that bad. But the 80-year-old looking back would be like, thank you for trying.
Yeah.
And that was more
important. Some rapid fire questions.
Yes.
AGI, overhyped, underhyped? Are we there? Are we never going to get there?
I think sure predictions are interesting around it, but I think it's on the right hype curve at the moment.
So we'll get there.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it'll be a valuable step change for us.
What's one job that you think will exist in 5 years that doesn't exist today?
You know, like if I look at the transformation with AI at the moment, it's hard to point on one specifically, but I think one critical skill that will remain is the ability to understand problems and be able to solve them. So I think in a way, being entrepreneurial, being able to be agile and bold and create will be a critical role. So sorry, I haven't given a specific one on that, but I think that's going to stick around. That's going to become more relevant in a world that's got AI and potentially AGI behind it, is the ability to actually create new things as quickly as possible and create value fast. And to me, then entrepreneurship becomes critical.
SaaS, is it dead or is it fine? What's your take?
I think some of it will die out because if you see the opportunity now, the ability to build really quickly, I really think businesses should invest in their own operating systems. That, like, even if you're in the exact same organization doing the same thing in the same industry, like your people, your processes, your tech really determine how you grow. So if you're all using the same SaaS systems, it's kind of like, for me, can be a bit of a limitation around creating a unique offering to the world. So I think there'll be cases where it's super sticky and SaaS will remain because you just can't get rid of it, or it's too hard to get rid of. But there'll be cases where, and you see it already, people changing their CRMs and their HR systems by building their own things. So I think it's a bit of both. Yeah.
The most overrated tool in every developer's stack right now?
For me, honestly, this might be contentious in my IDE. Like, you swore by it back in the day, and now it's like, do I even need this thing? kind of thing. Like, in terms of your actual development flow with AI, how much time do I need to spend in my IDE anymore? I'm not sure. And I know there's like a lot of tools integrated still into the flow, but I think that flow is changing quite a bit. So yeah, interested to see where they land. Yeah.
Great take. And then last one, vibe coding. Is it the future or a trap?
I'm hoping to see the back of it at some point. I think the spec-driven design with AI just makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more considered, a lot more thoughtful. And, you know, building a framework or guardrails for AI and how you use it in your software development lifecycle. So that would be the turn I'd like us to go down. So vibe coding hopefully dies off.
There you have it, ladies and gents. Darryl Govender. Shout out to Octant. Go and download it on all of the relevant app stores. Use promo code PJ for a 50% lifetime discount.
We'll link to Octant in all of our notes.
Awesome.
We really want to thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Nick.
And we just got something small for you.
Awesome.
From PJ, from Assembly Line.
Cheers. Thanks.
And hope to do this again soon.
Yeah.
Thanks. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Cheers.